Hello, and welcome to the Quarantine Queens Theater Company's Gothic Horror Show. Today, we will have three pieces for you. We will be opening with The Illuminati by Alice Gertensberg, followed by The Oblong Box by Edgar Allan Poe, and we'll be finishing up with Robert Frost's Witch of Cooes. The actors we have today are Karen Fulda out of Houston. We have Sydney Hansen and Cassidy Fritsch, and then our production manager, Tanya Heath. As always, our trusty, wonderful technical director, Colleen Shea, is here. And yeah, we're excited to get right into the show for you today. So buckle in. Right now, we're jumping straight into The Illuminati. And that will be Karen and I. So if everyone could, yeah, there we go. All right.
Well, who?
Guess.
Impossible.
Try.
Then
Answer.
what?
Truth.
Again?
Stop.
Here,
No.
there.
No.
Answer.
No.
Whereupon,
Never.
indeed,
Gone.
valued.
Much.
How?
Very.
Terrible.
Nevertheless,
Impudence.
go.
Yes.
Come.
Why?
Why not?
But if,
It might.
could it?
Do you?
For life.
Forever.
Although I,
Whereas you
because
you care.
whether you,
Or I.
either one,
Moreover,
was it so?
you doubt?
Proof.
There it is.
Where is it?
Are words nothing?
Everything.
Enough.
Quite, but
But what?
where is it?
Look,
I cannot.
you will not.
Curses.
How dare you?
I denounce.
Leave me.
Not before.
At once.
Answer me.
I won't.
You will.
Sunrise.
You said it.
Said what?
The truth.
Words.
I'll not let.
Electric bulbs.
That ends it.
Quite mad.
Fool.
Coward.
Come.
No.
Don't resist.
The law.
A star.
You?
I.
I didn't know.
Of course not.
I don't believe it.
Imprisoned.
You wouldn't.
Inevitable.
I implore you.
Without doubt.
Forgive.
Too late.
Love.
Love.
Love, love, love.
Love.
The ring.
They're coming.
Hide me.
You must pay.
The letter.
Which one?
His to you.
Ah, that.
Out with it.
You read it.
Never.
Give it to me.
No.
Command.
Now your answer.
Revenge.
You dare.
My promise.
On your knees.
Vampire.
You beg.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Crimson blue.
Oh,
Violet. Purple.
hush.
Orange. Yellow.
Stop. Stop.
Magenta.
Oh, my head.
All right. Next we have The Oblong Box, being read by our very own Tanya Heath. Settle in. It's excellent.
The Oblong Box, Edgar Allan Poe. Some years ago, I engaged passage from Charleston, South Carolina, to the city of New York in the fine packet ship Independence, Captain Hardy. We were to sail on the 15th of the month of June, weather permitting, and on the 14th, I went on board to arrange some matters in my stateroom. I found that we were to have a great many passengers, including a more than usual number of ladies. On the list were several of my acquaintances, and among other names, I was rejoiced to see that Mr. Cornelius Wyatt, a young artist for whom I entertained feelings of warm friendship. He had been with me, a fellow student at C University, where we were very much together. He had the ordinary temperament of genius and was a compound of misanthropy, sensibility, and enthusiasm. To these qualities, he united the warmest and truest heart that ever beat in a human bosom. I observed that his name was carded upon 3 staterooms, and upon again referring to the list of passengers, I found that he had engaged passage for himself, his wife, and 2 sisters, his own. The staterooms were sufficiently roomy, and each had 2 berths, one above the other. These berths, to be sure, were so exceedingly narrow as to be insufficient for more than one person. Still, I could not comprehend why there were 3 staterooms for these 4 persons. I was, just at that epoch, in one of those moody frames of mind which makes a man abnormally inquisitive about trifles, and I confess with shame that I busied myself in a variety of ill-bred and preposterous conjectures about this matter of the supernumerary stateroom. It was no business of mine, to be sure, but with none the less pertinency did I occupy myself in attempts to resolve the enigma. At last, I reached a conclusion which wrought in me greater wonder why I had not arrived at it before. It's a servant, of course, I said. What fool am I, not sooner to have thought of such an obvious solution. And then I again repaired to the list. But here I saw distinctly that no servant was to come with the party, although in fact it had been the original design to bring one, for the words "and servant" had first been written and then overscored. Oh, extra baggage to be sure, I said to myself. Something he wishes not to be put in the hold. Something to be kept under his own eye. Ha ha, I have it. A painting or so. And this is what he has been bargaining about with Nicolino, the Italian Jew. This idea satisfied me, and I dismissed my curiosity for the nonce. Wyatt's 2 sisters I knew very well, and most amicable and clever girls they were. His wife, he had been newly married, and I had never yet seen her. He had often talked about her in my presence, however, and in his usual style of enthusiasm, he described her as surpassing beauty, wit, accomplishment. I was, therefore, quite anxious to make her acquaintance. On the day in which I visited the ship, the 14th, Wyatt and his party were also to visit it, so the captain informed me, and I waited on board an hour longer than I had designed and hoped of being presented to the bride. But then an apology came. Mrs. W. was a little indisposed and would decline coming on board until tomorrow at the hour of sailing. The morrow having arrived, I was going from my hotel to the wharf when Captain Hardy met me and said that, owing to circumstances, a stupid but convenient phrase, he rather thought the Independence would not sail for a day or two, and that when all was ready, he would send up and let me know. Well, I thought this strange, for there was a stiff southerly breeze. But as the circumstances were not forthcoming, although I pumped for them with much perseverance, I had nothing to do but to return home and digest my impatience at leisure. I did not receive the expected message from the captain for nearly a week. It came at length, however, and I immediately went on board. The ship was crowded with passengers, and everything was in the bustle attendant upon making sail. Wyatt's party arrived about 10 minutes after myself. There were two sisters, the bride, and the artist, the latter in one of his customary fits of moody misanthropy. I was well used to those. However, to pay them any special attention, he did not even introduce me to his wife, this courtesy devolving perforce upon his sister Marian, a very sweet and intelligent girl, who, in a few hurried words, made us acquainted. Mrs. Wyatt had been closely veiled, and when she raised her veil, in acknowledging my bow, I confess that I was very profoundly astonished. I should have been more so, however, had not long experience advised me not to trust, with too implicit a reliance, the enthusiastic descriptions of my friend, the artist, when indulging in comments upon the loveliness of women. When beauty was the theme, I knew well with what facility he soared into the regions of the purely ideal. The truth is, I could not help regarding Mrs. Wyatt as a decidedly plain-looking woman. If not positively ugly, she was not, I think, very far from it. She was dressed, however, in exquisite taste, and I had no doubt that she had captivated my friend's heart by the more enduring graces of the intellect and soul. She said very few words, and passed at once into her stateroom with Mr. W. My old inquisitiveness had now returned. There was no servant. That was a settled point. I looked, therefore, for extra baggage. After some delay, a cart arrived at the wharf with an oblong pine box, which was everything that seemed to be expected. Immediately upon its arrival, we made sail, and in a short time were safely over the bar and standing out to sea. The box in question was, as I say, oblong. It was about 6 feet in length by 2.5 in breadth. I observed it attentively and liked to be precise. Now, this shape was peculiar, and no sooner had I seen it than I took credit to myself for the accuracy of my guessing. I had reached a conclusion, it will be remembered, that the extra baggage of my friend, the artist, would prove to be pictures, or at least a picture, for I knew it had been several weeks in conference with Nicolino. And now, here was a box, which, from its shape, could possibly contain nothing in the world but a copy of Leonardo's Last Supper, and a copy of this very Last Supper, done by Rubini the Younger at Florence, I considered as sufficiently settled. I chuckled excessively when I thought of my acumen. It was the first time I had ever known Wyatt to keep from me any of his artistical secrets, but here he evidently intended to steal a march upon me. and smuggle a fine picture to New York under my very nose, expecting me, to know nothing of the matter. I resolved to quiz him well now and hereafter. One thing, however, annoyed me a little. The box did not go into the extra stateroom. It was deposited in Wyatt's own, and there too it remained, occupying very nearly the whole of the floor, no doubt to the exceeding discomfort of the artist and his wife. This more especially as the tar of paint, with which it was lettered in sprawling capitals, emitted a strong, disagreeable, and to my fancy, particularly disgusting odor. On the lid, painted the words, Mrs. Adelaide Curtis, Albany, New York. Charge of Cornelius Wyatt, Esquire. This side up, to be handled with care. Now, I was aware that Mrs. Adelaide Curtis of Albany was the artist's wife's mother. But then I looked upon the whole address as a mystification, intended especially for myself. I made up my mind, of course, that the box and its contents would never get farther north than the studio of my misanthropic friend in Chambers Street, New York. For the first 3 or 4 days, we had fine weather, though the wind was dead ahead, having chopped around to the northward immediately upon losing sight of the coast. The passengers were, consequently, in high spirits and disposed to be social. I must except, however, Wyatt and his sisters, who behaved stiffly, and I could not help thinking uncourteously to the rest of the party. Wyatt's conduct I did not so much regard. He was gloomy, even beyond his usual habit. In fact, he was morose. But in him I was prepared for eccentricity. For the sisters, however, I could make no excuse. They secluded themselves in their staterooms during the greater part of the passage, and absolutely refused, although I repeatedly urged them, to hold communication with any person on board. Mrs. Wyatt herself was far more agreeable. That is to say, she was chatty, and to be chatty is no slight recommendation at sea. She became excessively intimate with most of the ladies, and, to my profound astonishment, evinced no equivocal disposition to coquette with the men. She amused us all very much. I say, amused, and scarcely know how to explain it myself. The truth is, I found that Mrs. W. was far oftener laughed at than laughed with. The gentlemen said little about her, but the ladies, in a little while, pronounced her a good-hearted thing, rather indifferent-looking, totally uneducated, and decidedly vulgar. The greater wonder was how Wyatt had been entrapped into such a match. Wealth was a general solution, but I knew this to be no solution at all, for Wyatt had told me that she neither bought upon him $1 nor had any expectations from any source whatsoever. He had married, he said, for love, and for love only, and his bride was far more than worthy of his love. When I thought of these expressions on the part of my friend, I confess that I felt indescribably puzzled. Could it be possible that he was taking leave of his senses? What else could I think? He, so refined, so intellectual, so fastidious, with such an exquisite a perception of the faculty, and so keen an appreciation of the beautiful? To be sure, the lady seemed especially fond of him, particularly so in his absence, when she made herself ridiculous by frequent quotations of what had been said by her beloved husband, Mr. Wyatt. The word husband seemed forever, to use one of her own delicate expressions, forever on the tip of her tongue. In the meantime, it was observed by all on board that he avoided her in the most pointed manner, and, for the most part, shut himself up alone in his stateroom, where in fact he might have been said to live altogether, leaving his wife at full liberty to amuse herself as she thought best in the public society of the main cabin. In conclusion, from what I saw and heard, was that the artist, by some unaccountable freak of fate, or perhaps some fit of enthusiastic and fanciful passion, had been induced to unite himself with a person altogether beneath him, and that the natural result, entirely in speedy disgust, had ensued. Oh, I pitied him from the bottom of my heart, but could not, for that reason, quite forgive his incommunicativeness in the matter of that Last Supper. For this, I resolved to have my revenge. One day, he came upon deck, and, taking his arm, as had been my wont, I sauntered with him backward and forward. His gloom, however, which I considered quite natural under the circumstances, seemed entirely unabated. He said little, and that moodily and with evident effort. I ventured a jest or two, and he made a sickening attempt at a smile. Poor fellow. As I thought of his wife, I wondered what he could have heart to put on even the semblance of mirth. I determined to commence a series of covert insinuations or innuendos about the oblong box, just to let him perceive gradually that I was not altogether the butt or victim of his little bit of pleasant mystification. My first observation was by the way of opening a masked battery. I said something about the peculiar shape of the box, and as I spoke the words, I smiled knowingly, winked, and touched him gently in the forefinger with my rib of his ribs. The manner in which Wyatt received this harmless pleasantry convinced me at once that he was mad. At first he stared at me if he found it impossible to comprehend the witticism of my remark, but at its point seemed slowly to make its way into his brain. His eyes, in the same proportion, seemed protruding from their sockets. Then he grew very red, then hideously pale. Then, as if highly amused with what I had insinuated, he began a loud and boisterous laugh, which, to my astonishment, he kept up with gradually increasing vigor for 10 minutes or more. In conclusion, he fell flat and heavily upon the deck. When I ran to uplift him, to all appearance, he was dead. I called assistance, and with much difficulty, we brought him upon himself. Upon reviving, he spoke incoherently for some time. At length, we bled him and put him to bed. The next morning, he was quite recovered, so far as regarded his mere bodily health. Of his mind, I could say nothing, of course. I avoided him during the rest of the passage, by advice of the captain, who seemed to coincide with me altogether in the views of his insanity, but cautioned me to say nothing on this head to any person on board. Several circumstances occurred immediately after this fit of Wyatt, which contributed to heighten the curiosity which I was already possessed. Among other things, this. I had been nervous, drank too much strong green tea, and slept ill at night. In fact, for 2 nights I could not properly said to sleep at all. Now, my stateroom opened up into the main cabin, or the dining room, as did all those of the single men on board. Wyatt's 3 rooms were in the after cabin, which were separated from the main one by a slight sliding door, never locked even at night. We were almost constantly on a wind, and the breeze was not a little stiff. The ship heeled to leeward very considerably, and whenever her starboard side was to leeward, the sliding door between the cabins slid open, and so remained. Nobody taking the trouble to get up and shut it. But my berth was in such a position that when my own stateroom door was open, as well as the sliding door in question, and my own door was always open on account of the heat, I can see into the cabin quite distinctly. And just at that portion of it, too, where were situated the staterooms of Mr. Wyatt. Well, during those 2 nights, not consecutive, while I lay awake, I clearly saw Mrs. W. about 11 o'clock upon each night steal cautiously from the stateroom of Mr. W. and enter that extra room, where she remained until daybreak, when she was called upon by her husband and went back. They were virtually separated, was clear. They had separate apartments, no doubt in contemplation of a more permanent divorce. And here, after all, I thought was the mystery of the extra stateroom. There was another circumstance, too, which interests me much. During the 2 wakeful nights in question, and immediately after the disappearance of Mrs. Wyatt into that extra stateroom, I was attracted by a certain singular, cautious, subdued noises in that of her husband. After listening to them for some time, with thoughtful attention, I at length succeeded perfectly in translating their import. They were sounds contained by the artist in prying open the oblong box by means of chisel and mallet, the latter being apparently muffled or deadened by some soft woolen or cotton substance in which its head was enveloped. In this manner, I fancy I could distinguish the precise moment where he fairly disengaged the lid. Also, that I could determine when he removed it altogether and when he deposited it upon the lower berth in his room. This latter point I knew, by example, by certain slight taps which the lid made in striking against the wooden edges of the berth, as he endeavored to lay it down very gently, there being no room for it on the floor. After this, there was a dead stillness, and I heard nothing more upon either occasion until nearly daybreak, unless perhaps I may mention a low sobbing or murmuring sound, so much suppressed as to be nearly audible, if indeed the whole of this latter noise were not produced by my own imagination. I say it seemed to resemble sobbing or sighing, but of course it could not have been either. I rather think it was a ringing in my own ears. Mr. Wyatt, no doubt, according to custom, was merely giving his rein to one of his hobbies, indulging in one of his fits of artistic enthusiasm. He opened his oblong box in order to feast his eyes on the pictorial treasure within. There is nothing in this, however, to make him sob. I repeat, therefore, that it must have been simply a freak of my own fancy, distempered by good Captain Hardy's green tea. Just before dawn, on each of the 2 days of which I speak, I distinctly heard Mr. Wyatt replace the lid upon the oblong box and force the nails into their old places by means of that muffled mallet. Having done this, he issued from his stateroom, fully dressed, and proceeded to call Mrs. W. from hers. We had been at sea 7 days, and were now off at Cape Hatteras, when there came a tremendously heavy blow from the southwest. We were, in a measure, prepared for it. However, as the weather had been holding out some threats for some time, everything was made snug, alow and aloft, and when the wind steadily freshened, we lay to at length under spanker and foretopsail, both double reefed. In this trim, we rode safely enough for 48 hours, the ship proving herself an excellent seaboat in many respects, and shipping no water of any consequence. At the end of this period, however, the gale had freshened into a hurricane, and our aftersail split into ribbons, bringing us so much in the throe of the water that we shipped several prodigious seas, one immediately after the other. By this accident, we lost 3 men overboard with the caboose, and nearly the whole of the larboard bulwarks. Scarcely we had rediscovered our senses before the top foresail went into shreds. When we got up a storm stay sail, and with this did pretty well for some hours, the ship heading the sea more steadily than before. The gale still held on, and we saw no signs of it abating. The rigging was found to be ill-fitted and greatly strained, and on the 3rd day of the blow, about 5 in the afternoon, Our mizzenmast and a heavy lurch to windward went by the board. For an hour or more, we tried in vain to get rid of it on account of the prodigious rolling of the ship. Before we had succeeded, the carpenter came aft and announced 4 feet of water in the hold. To add to our dilemma, we found the pumps choked and nearly useless. All was confusion and despair, but in an effort we made to lighten the ship by throwing overboard much of our cargo, as much of our cargo that could be reached, and by cutting away 2 masts that remained. This we at last accomplished. We were still unable to do anything at the pumps, and in the meantime, the leak gained on us very fast. At sundown, the gale had sensibly diminished in violence, and the sea went down with it. We still entertained faint hopes of saving ourselves in the boats. At 8 p.m., the clouds broke away to windward, and we had the advantage of a full moon. A piece of good fortune, which wonderfully served to cheer our drooping spirits. After incredible labor, we succeeded, in length, in getting the longboat over the side without material accident. And into this we crowded the whole of the crew and most of the passengers. This party made off immediately, and after undergoing much suffering, finally arrived in safety at Ocracoke Inlet on the 3rd day after the wreck. 14 passengers, with the captain, remained on board, resolving to trust their fortunes to the jolly boat at the stern. We lowered it without difficulty, although it was only by a miracle that we prevented it from swamping as it touched the water. It contained, when afloat, the captain and his wife, Mr. Wyatt and party, a Mexican officer, wife, 4 children, and myself with the Negro valet. We had no room, of course, for anything except a few positively necessary instruments, some provision, and the clothes upon our backs. No one had even thought of attempting to save anything more. What must have been the astonishment of all, then, when having proceeded a few fathoms from the ship, Mr. Wyatt stood up in the stern sheets and coolly demanded of Captain Hardy that the boat should be put back for the purpose of taking in his oblong box. "Sit down, Mr. Wyatt," replied the captain somewhat sternly. "You will capsize us if you do not sit quite still. Our gunwale is almost in the water now." "The box!" vociferated Mr. Wyatt, still standing. "The box, I say! Captain Hardy, you will not refuse me. Its weight will be but a trifle. It is nothing, mere nothing. By the mother who bore you, or the love of heaven, by your hope of salvation, I implore you to put back for the box." The captain, for a moment, seemed touched by the earnest appeal of the artist, but he regained his stern composure and merely said, "Mr. Wyatt, you are mad. I cannot listen to you. Sit down, I say, or you will swamp the boat. Stay, hold him, seize him. He's about to spring overboard. There, I knew it. He's over." As the captain said this, Mr. Wyatt, in fact, sprang from the boat, and as we were yet in the lee of the wreck, succeeded by almost superhuman exertion in getting a hold of the rope which hung from the forechains. In another moment, he was on board, rushing frantically down into the cabin. In the meantime, we had been swept astern of the ship, and being quite out of her lee, were at the mercy of the tremendous sea which was still running. We made a determined effort to put back, but our little boat was like a feather in the breath of the tempest. We saw at a glance the doom of the unfortunate artist was sealed. As our distance from the wreck rapidly increased, the madman, for only such we could regard him, was seen to emerge from the companion way up, which by the dint of his strength appeared gigantic. He dragged bodily that oblong box. While we gazed in extremity of his astonishment, he passed rapidly several turns of a 3-inch rope, first around the box and then around his body. In another instant, both body and box were in the sea, disappearing suddenly, at once and forever. We lingered a while sadly upon our oars, our eyes riveted upon that spot. At length we pulled away. The silence remained unbroken for an hour. Finally, I hazarded a remark. Did you observe, Captain, how suddenly they sank? Was that not an exceedingly singular thing? I confess that I entertained some feeble hope of his final deliverance when I saw him lash himself to the box and commit himself to the sea. They sink as a matter of course, replied the captain, and that like a shot. They will soon rise again, however, but not till the salt melts. The salt! I ejaculated. Hush, said the captain, pointing to the wife and the sister of the deceased. We must talk of these things at some more appropriate time. We suffered much and made a narrow escape, but fortune befriended us, as well as our mates in the longboat. We landed in fine, more dead than alive, after 4 days of intense distress upon the beach beside Roanoke Island. We remained here a week, were not ill-treated by the wreckers, and at length obtained a passage to New York. After about a month on the loss of the Independence, I happened to meet Captain Hardy on Broadway. Our conversation turned, naturally, upon the disaster and upon the sad fate of poor Wyatt. I thus learned the following particulars. The artist had engaged passage for himself, his wife, his 2 sisters, and a servant. The wife was indeed, as she had been represented, a most lovely and most accomplished woman. On the morning of the 14th of June, the day on which I first visited the ship, the lady had suddenly sickened and died. The young husband was frantic with grief, but circumstances imperatively forbade the deferring of his voyage to New York. It was necessary to take her mother the corpse of his adored wife, and, on the other hand, the universal prejudice which would prevent his doing so openly was well known. 9/10 of the passengers would have abandoned the ship rather than take passage with a dead body. In this dilemma, Captain Hardy arranged that the corpse, first being partially embalmed and packed with a large quantity of salt and a box of suitable dimensions, should be conveyed on board as merchandise. Nothing was to be said of the lady's decease, and as it was well understood that Mr. Wyatt had engaged passage for his wife, it became necessary that some person should personate her during the voyage. This deceased lady's maid was easily prevailed to do so. The extra stateroom, originally engaged for this girl during her mistress's life, was now merely retained. In this stateroom, the Suedo wife slept, of course, every night. In the daytime, she performed, to the best of her ability, the part of her mistress, whose person, it had been carefully ascertained, was unknown to any of the passengers on board. My honest mistake arose, naturally enough. Though too careless, too inquisitive, and too impulsive a temperament. But of late, it is a rare thing that I sleep soundly at night. There is a countenance which haunts me, turn as I will. There is an hysterical laugh which will forever ring within my ears.
What a wonderful dramatic reading by Tanya. One of my favorites. I hope y'all love Edgar Allan Poe. And next up, we have Sydney Hansen and, I'm sorry, did I say that? Yeah, Sydney Hansen and Cassidy Fritsch, and they will be performing The Witch of Coos by Robert Frost. Take it away, please.
Folks think a witch who has familiar spirit should call up to pass a winter evening, but won't, should be burned at the stake or something. Summoning spirits isn't button. Who's got the button? I would have them know.
Mother can make a common table rear and kick with 2 legs like an army mule.
And when I've done it, what good have I done? Rather than tip a table for you, let me tell you what Raleigh the Sioux Council once told me. He said, the dead had souls, But when I asked him, how could that be? I thought the dead were souls. He broke my trance. Don't that make you suspicious that there's something the dead are keeping back? Yes, there's something the dead are keeping back.
You wouldn't want to tell him what we have up attic, Mother.
Bones. A skeleton.
But the headboard of Mother's bed is pushed up against the attic door. The door is nailed, it's harmless. Mother hears it in the night, halting and perplexed behind the barrier of door and headboard. Where it wants to get is back into the cellar where it came from.
We'll never let them. We will. Son, we'll never.
It left the cellar 40 years ago and carried itself like a pile of dishes. Up went fright from the cellar to the kitchen, another from the kitchen to the bedroom, another from the bedroom to the attic, right past both father and mother, and neither stopped it. Father had gone upstairs, mother was downstairs. I was a baby, I don't know where I was.
The only fault my husband found with me, I went to sleep before I went to bed, especially in winter when the bed might just as well be ice in the closed snow. The night the bones came up the cellar stairs, Tothile had gone to bed alone and left me, but left an open door to cool the room off, so as to sort of turn me out of it. I was just coming to myself enough to wonder where the cold was coming from when I heard Tothile upstairs in the bedroom, and I thought I heard him downstairs in the cellar. The board we had laid down to walk dry shot on when there was water in the cellar in spring, struck the hard cellar bottom, and then someone began the stairs, 2 footsteps for each step, the way a man with one leg and a crutch, or a little child comes up. It wasn't Tothile. It wasn't anyone who could be there. The bulkhead double doors were double locked and swollen tight and buried under snow. The cellar windows were banked up with sawdust and swollen tight and buried under snow. It was the bones. I knew them, and good reason. My first impulse was to get to the knob and hold the door. But the bones didn't try. The door, they halted helpless on the landing, waiting for things to happen in their favor. The faintest, restless rustling ran all through them. I could never have done the thing I did if the wish hadn't been too strong in me to see how they were mounted for this walk. I had a vision of them put together. Not like a man, but like a chandelier. So suddenly I flung the door open wide on him. A moment he stood balancing with emotion and all but lost himself. A tongue of fire flashed out and licked his upper teeth. Smoke rolled inside the sockets of his eyes. Then he came at me with one hand stretched out, the way he did in life once. But this time, I struck the hand off brittle on the floor and fell back from him on the floor myself. The 2 finger pieces slid in all directions. Why did I see one of those pieces lately? Hand me my button box. It must be there. I sat up on the floor and shouted, Tothile, it's coming up to you. It had its choice of the door to the cellar or the hall. It took the hall door for novelty and set off briskly for so slow a thing. Still going every which way in the joints though, so that it looked like lightning or a scribble from the slap I had now just given its hand. I listened till it almost climbed the stairs from the hall to the only finished bedroom. Before I got up to do anything, Ben ran and shouted, shut the door behind you, Tothile, for my sake, company. He said, don't make me get up, I'm too warm in bed. So lying forward weakly on the handrail, I pushed myself upstairs, and in the light, the kitchen had been dark. I had to own. I could see nothing. Tophail, I don't see it. It's with us in the room, though. It's the bones, the cellar bones out of the grave that made him throw his bare legs out of bed and sit up by me and take hold of me. I wanted to put the light and see if I could see it, or else mow the room with our arms at the level of our knees and bring the chalk pile down. I tell you what, it's looking for another door to try. The uncommonly deep snow has made him think of his old song, The Wild Colonial Boy. He always used to sing along the tote road. He's after an open door to get our doors. Let's trap him with an open door up attic. Tophail agreed to that. And sure enough, almost the moment he was given an opening, the steps began to climb the attic stairs. I heard them. Tophail didn't seem to hear them. Quick! I slammed the door and held the knob. Tophail, get nails. I made him nail the door shut and push the headboard of the bed against it. Then we asked if there were anything up attic that we'd ever want again. The attic was less to us than the cellar. If the bones liked the attic, let them have it. Let them stay in the attic. Would sometimes come down the stairs at night and stand perplexed behind the door and headboard of the bed, brushing the chalky skull with chalky fingers, with sounds like dry rattling of a shutter. That's what I sit up in the dark to say to no one anymore since Tophail died. Let them stay in the attic since they went there. I promised Tophail to be cruel to them for helping them to be cruel once to him.
We think they did.
We know they had a grave down in the cellar.
We never could find out whose bones they were.
Yes, we could too, son. Tell the truth for once. They were a man's. His father killed for me. I mean a man he killed instead of me. The least I could do was help dig their grave. We were about it one night in the cellar. Son knows the story. But 'twas not for him to tell the truth, suppose the time had come. Son looks surprised to see me and a lie. We kept all these years between ourselves so as to have it ready for outsiders. But tonight, I don't care enough to lie. I don't remember why I ever cared. Tophail, if he were here, I don't believe could tell you why he ever cared himself.
Hello. Welcome back, all of our wonderful queens. Good work, ladies. I just want to apologize real quick. We were changing the format of the intro and I did none of the things that I practiced, but don't worry, we're going to get to it right now. So we are the Quarantine Queens Theater Company. We are an online all women plus international theater company, and we put on performances each week. We're now producing additional content outside of our weekly show, and we will be having a few collaborations with other theaters coming up. So stay tuned for that. We also have a few other things coming up, including our Halloween marathon show at the end of the month, which is going to be an international coordinated event where we're bringing in people from all over to tell scary stories or urban legends from like their region, or, you know, whatever they're going to bring. Probably have some scary, spooky images from our artists. So if you are interested, or you know anyone who is interested, please get them in touch with us. We would love to have them. And let me not put it off any further. Let's go ahead and meet everybody properly. I'll turn it over to our technical director, Colleen Shea, first.
All right, my name is Colleen Shea. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a New York City technical theater teacher and the technical director, sound, anything that comes up here at TQQ. And my plug is, as the numbers rise, as our children go back to school, please wear your mask and please be aware of everyone's struggle in the arts community as we try and make sure that content and our artistic experiences stay relevant and alive.
Great. Tanya Heath.
Hello, my loves. My name is Tanya J. Heath, and I am the production manager. I'm still not used to saying that for TQQ. So I do a lot of fun work, including front of the house and just making sure all the other managers are gravy and good and groovy. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I also throw in John because I am from Philadelphia. And I would like to plug, as we go into the fall, to just be mindful of whatever time that we can get with our families and friends and loved ones. Zoom is in itself a gift and a curse, but at least we can see them even though we can't be with them. And just keep in mind that Black Lives Matter, and this is not a moment, it's a movement.
Thank you. Cassidy Fritsch.
Hi everyone, my name is Cassidy and I go by hers, or whatever you want to call me, Cass. I pretty much answer to anything. I did my MA in theater directing with Hillary at the East 15 Acting School in London. So I'm really glad that the quarantine theater, the TQQ, sorry, tongue twister there. I'm really glad that the TQQ have invited me to act in their shows because I miss acting a bit. For my plug-in, I'm currently working on a few projects. I just started my own online pet store. So if you guys have any pets and are looking for any like dog clothes or cat clothes, I can send you guys my website. And I'm also working on another company where we help other companies grow. And right now I am starting a DIY mental health booklet because I know that also depression and anxiety has gone up a lot during this time of when we have to be at home. So that's still in the works. It's sort of like I'm gonna write like little things that people can do to stay healthy, but you can also journal. And the point of the DIY booklets is to look back like a year from now and see how far you've come as a person. And yeah, I'm in the process of trying to move back to London. So it's been, it's been cray, but it's been good. But that's all for me.
Thank you. Karen Fulda. You are on mute.
I think you are on mute is going to be the catchphrase of 2020.
Yes.
I'm Karen and live in Houston. I go by she, her, hers. And I'm a singer, writer, actress. The personal plugs right now, you can look me up on YouTube. I have a channel where I've been doing, my happy place during quarantine has been doing parody songs. And I've also been doing a lot of writing and acting in radio plays with Cone Man Productions. And just please vote, register to vote, very important.
Great, thank you. And Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney Henson, she, her, hers. I'm an actor and fight choreographer based in Chicago. If you're interested in fight choreography, there are a lot of great virtual stage combat workshops. The next one I know of is Halloween Weekend, which is based in Philadelphia, but you can do it from home. A lot of these stage combat workshops are giving funds to Black Lives Matter, which is great, and I second that. Black Lives Matter, right? Always. Please vote. Stay well. Check in with yourself. Love yourself. And that's my plug.
I just love how loving this company is. And like a lot of times when we ask people to plug things, they just plug other people. And it's so sweet. And I want to give you all a big hug. Wanted to let you know about a few other things coming up. I know that my dog made an appearance and I saw another cat make an appearance. We love our pets here at TQQ, so they are going to be having a show come up. You just keep an eye out for that. I'll let you more when that comes out. And yeah, so get excited. Be helpful by sharing scripts or tips or our videos. Like, share, subscribe, all the things where we've just, we've moved on to all the social medias. We can now restream onto Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, I believe. Whatever she says we could do, I don't know. So if Facebook isn't your preferred format, you can watch us anywhere. So keep an eye out. We're going to put their links in the doobly-doo, so you can find them and their projects. And as always, come for the theater, stay for the play. Thank you.
Hi guys, just a quick reminder to check out all the links below. Don't forget about our Patreon and like and subscribe on YouTube. Just want to double check and plug that you come back next week, October 11th at 2 p.m. where we're featuring 2 shows by Karen Fulda, Vampires on Zoom, and a show from Hilary Metzger, our artistic director. See you soon.